We continue now at the top of Daf Samech Gimel Amud Beis Meseches Yoma. This is Yoma Daf 63b. We're in the middle of a brisa now that's discussing shchutei chutz, when you shecht a carbon that's supposed to be in the Beis HaMikdash, but you shecht it outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So the brisa continues, e carbon. If the pasuk says the word carbon, that you're shechting the carbon outside the Beis HaMikdash, shomea niyafilu kachei berek habayis. I might think this is true even by kachei berek habayis. Kachei berek habayis means you sanctified it not to be a carbon brought on the Mizbeach, but just its monetary value you're donating to the Beis HaMikdash. I might think even there applies the halach of shchutei chutz, shenikru carbon, because we find that kachei berek habayis are also called carbon, ke'inyan shenemar, like the pasuk says. This is a pasuk in Bamidbar. It says, Vanakrev is Karban Hashem. It says, we brought the Karban Hashem, which was just talking about a donation of Berek HaBayis. So Talmud Lomar, so that's why the pasuk goes on to say, V'el Pesach Oel Moed Lo Heviu. He shechted it outside. He did not bring it to the entrance of the Oel Moed. It means to say, Kol Haroy Le Pesach Oel Moed, something which is fit for the entrance of the Oel Moed, meaning it is fit to be brought as a carbon. Chayev Ola B'chutz, then you're chayev. If you have shchutei chutz, if you shecht it outside the Beis HaMikdash, Kol but if it's not fit to be brought to the entrance of the Oel Moed, ein chayavin ola b'chutz, then you're not chayiv for shchutei chutz for such an animal. And Rashi over here says, Haroi lepesach v'kachei berek habayis. When you have kachei berek habayis, lo hayu asidim lovo lepesach oel moed. You're not bringing that to the entrance of the oel moed because they're not being brought as a carbon. And Rashi says, Vanisha mati, I heard she'enon ru'uyin lepesach oel moed. They're not even fit to be brought to the entrance of the oel moed. Shestam kachei berek habayis bali mumenhein, because min hastam most kachei berek habayis are animals that have blemishes, so they can't be brought there anyway. To Amar Mar, like the master said, hamatzvis temimim leberek habayis. If somebody takes animals that are not blemished and donates them to berek habayis over biaseh, so then you transgress an aseh. V'yefshar lahamida kain b'mekom Meseches Vachim. Rashi says you can't say that this is pshat over there in Meseches Vachim, this pshat which Rashi heard. In any case, the brisa continues, Otzi elu she'ein ru'uyin lepesach oel moed. I can exclude kachei berek habayis because again they're not fit for the pesach oel moed, so there's no din of shchutei chutz. However, v'lo otzi paras chatos v'seir hamishtaleach. But maybe I should not exclude the paras chatos. This refers to the para aduma that is brought for the mechatos and the seir hamishtaleach, shehu roi lovo a pesach oel moed, because those are fit to be brought to the entrance of the Oel Moed, so maybe I won't exclude those. Maybe there's a halach of shchutei chutz when it comes to paras chatos and when it comes to seir mishtaleach. So the brisa says no. Talmud Lomar la Hashem. The pasuk says you're bringing it la Hashem. Mishem yuchadin la Hashem. It has to be an animal that is designated for Hashem, meaning as a carbon. Yatzu elu she'ein miyuchadin la Hashem. That excludes these two cases, the para aduma and the seir mishtaleach. Those are not designated la Hashem. And we'll take a look at Rashi over here. Rashi says, V'lo otzi paras chatos. Maybe I shouldn't exclude the paras chatos because, again, that is fit for the Pesach Oel Moed. Rashi says, Lo garsina. You should take out that line. Don't have that in the text. Sha'afi einu ru'uya lovo lo Oel Moed, because the paras chatos is not fit to be brought to the Pesach Oel Moed, so that wouldn't make any sense. Ela v'lo otzi seir hamishtaleach shehu roi lovo lo Oel Moed. It's just the seir hamishtaleach. The brisa is saying maybe the seir hamishtaleach, which in theory is fit to be brought to the Oel Moed, maybe the halach of shchutei chutz should apply. How is the seir hamishtaleach fit to be brought to the Oel Moed? Meaning lahagrilu lehisvados olav, because you're going to be bringing it to the Oel Moed to do the lottery, and you're going to be doing the confession. Hachim mefarish la b'zvachim. That's how it's explained in Zvachim. And so again, the Gemara had said that when it comes to the seir hamishtaleach, even though it's roy lepesach oel moed, since it's not miyuchad la Hashem, it's not designated as a carbon, it comes to the pesach oel moed for other purposes. Therefore, the halach of shchutei chutz does not apply to the seir hamishtaleach, and that's learned out from the word la Hashem. It has to be miyuchad la Hashem. So now the Gemara asks, v'la Hashem lahotziu, does the word la Hashem, does it really mean to be an exclusion? In other words, that word is used to exclude the seir mishtaleach? We see the exact opposite. Uraminu, we have the following contradiction. It says, Yeirotza lekarban isha la Hashem. It's talking about the fact that when an animal is 8 days old, it's fit to be a carbon. Elu ishim, this refers to the fact that it is brought on the fire, on the mizbeach. Minayin shelo yakdishenu mechusar zman. So the brisa says, how do you know that you're not allowed to sanctify the animal before it's actually 8 days old? Talmud Lomar, because the pasuk says, Karbon la Hashem. It's a carbon for Hashem. L'rabo se'ir hamishtaleach, and that comes to include even the se'ir hamishtaleach, that it should not be sanctified until it is 8 days old. So here you have the exact opposite. The word LaHashem here comes to include the se'ir hamishtaleach. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Rava, Rava says, Hasa mein yana dekra v'hacha mein yana dekra. In each case, it goes by the context of the pasuk. Hasam over there, del Pesach l'rabos. The phrase El Pesach comes to include anything that's brought to the entrance. So therefore, LaHashem lahotzi. So therefore, the word LaHashem comes and says not everything. Certain things are excluded. Hacha, but over here, di isha lahotzi, the phrase isha on the fire, that actually meant to exclude. So therefore, LaHashem l'rabos. Therefore, the word LaHashem comes to include even the se'ir hamishtaleach. And Rashi over here says, Hasam del Pesach l'rabos, when the word El Pesach is coming to include se'ir hamishtaleach, that would really include the se'ir hamishtaleach, the lo memayit me'el Pesach, because that wouldn't be excluded. Sharei roi lovo El Pesach, because you do bring it to the entrance of the Ol Moed. So therefore, LaHashem lahotzi, the word LaHashem comes to exclude. Also, that's what it comes for. De'ilu l'rabos lo itzrich. It's not needed to include, it's already included. V'chiyasa lahotzi asa, clearly it's coming to exclude, again, the se'ir hamishtaleach. U'lemedrish misha miyuchadin LaHashem yotza zeh she'eino miyuchad. Means to say, only that which is miyuchad LaHashem, like we said, and not that which is not designated specifically as a carbon. But here it's exactly the opposite. Hacha di isha mashma lahotzi. Here the word isha on the fire, that is excluding the se'ir hamishtaleach. Sharei eino ola l'ishim. That's not put on the fire, and therefore LaHashem l'riboy. So the word LaHashem comes to include. Also, that's what it's coming for. U'lemedrash LaHashem kol de LaHashem. And we darshan anything that's for Hashem, even the se'ir hamishtaleach. So essentially, Rava is answering it all depends on the context of the pasuk. And now the Gemara continues and analyzes the Braisa. Taima de Rabbi Rachman. It's only because the pasuk specifically includes the se'ir hamishtaleach and says you're not allowed to be mekadesh it b'mechusar zman. Hello, Rabbi, but if you didn't have that inclusion, hava amina se'ir hamishtaleach kadosh b'mechusar zman. I might have thought that the se'ir hamishtaleach you're allowed to sanctify it, even though it's not actually 8 days old. So that doesn't make any sense. The Gemara says, Va'ein hagorel koveya el boroi LaHashem. Remember, in order to determine what is the se'ir hamishtaleach, you bring 2 goats and you do a lottery, and the halacha is the lottery only works on an animal that's at least in theory roy to be LaHashem. One of these animals is going to be a carbon, and one is going to be the se'ir hamishtaleach. So how could it possibly be that you're going to sanctify the goat as the se'ir hamishtaleach before it's roy to be a carbon before 8 days old? It doesn't even make any sense. The gorel won't work if it's not roy to be LaHashem. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, Hamani Chanan HaMitzrihi. This brisa follows the opinion of Chanan HaMitzri, as Rashi over here says, Chanan HaMitzrihi de lesle hagrola. Chanan HaMitzri holds there's a situation where you don't even need to do a lottery for the se'ir hamishtaleach. What's the case? Mishehigril v'meis echad mehan. Let's say you already did the lottery, and then one of them died. Hilkoch kishamei se'ir hamishtaleach. If the se'ir hamishtaleach dies, umevi acher shelo b'hagrola, you bring another one, you don't do a lottery, hutzrach lalamin min ha-mikra shelo yavi mechusar zman. That's the chiddush of the pasuk. You might think there you could bring it when it's not the proper age. Kamash malon, no, even in this situation, you shouldn't bring it if it's not the proper age. In other words, what the Gemara is looking for is we're looking for Tanoim who hold that you can have a se'ir hamishtaleach without hagrola. Because with hagrola, it's obvious it has to be the proper age, because it has to be roy LaHashem. So that's what Rav Yosef is saying over here. Hamani Chanan HaMitzri, it follows Chanan HaMitzri. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Chanan HaMitzri Omer, Chanan HaMitzri says, Afilu dam bekos. Even if you already have the blood of the se'ir LaHashem, you already have received the blood, it's already been shechted. Mevi chaveru mezavig lo. You can bring another animal and pair it up. As Rashi over here says, Afilu dam shel sir hapnimi bekos shekvar nishchad. You already shechted the soyer LaHashem, umeis hamishtaleach, and then the se'ir hamishtaleach dies. Maybe chaveru min ashuk, you just bring another one, umezavig ledam mishalchad, you pair it up with the blood and you send it out. In other words, there's no need for hagrola. That's what it seems to be Chanan HaMitzri is saying. So if there's no need for hagrola, so it is possible to think you would do it b'mechusar zman. That's why you need a pasuk to say not. But the Gemara says, 1 second, is that really what Chanan HaMitzri is saying? Eimor de shamale Chanan HaMitzri de les le dechuyin. We understand that Chanan HaMitzri is saying it doesn't get pushed pushed off. Delesle hagrola mishamatli. He doesn't say explicitly there's no lottery. Dilma maisiu magril. Maybe you bring another animal and you actually do a lottery in that case, even when you already shechted one of the animals, as Rashi says. Delesle dechuyin delesle sheyehi hadam dichoy b'shvil chaveru shemes. All he was saying was that the blood that you've already received, that doesn't get pushed off because the other one dies. Lomer yishapech hadam. You might think you pour out the blood. Kedekama Rabbi Yehuda masis and meis hamishtalech yishapech hadam. That's actually Rabbi Yehuda's sheet in the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda says in the Mishnah, when the seir hamishtalech dies, you got to pour out the blood. But who says so? Fine, the blood is still good. But in terms of the other animal, maybe you bring two animals and you do a lottery. You'll have one will be Lashem, that you won't use because you already have blood Lashem. You use the original blood, you let the other one go out and graze. Maybe Chanana Mitzri holds you bring two animals, and you still do the lottery. And then it's still obvious that Mechusar Zman would be no good. Because the gorel is not going to work unless it's Roy Lashem. So to say it's Chanan HaMitzri, like Rav Yosef is suggesting, is not going to be so pashut. So rather, Rav Yosef gives another suggestion. Hamani Rabbi Shimon. This brisa follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is the shita who holds sometimes you don't need to do a lottery. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa, Meis Echon Mehen. Let's say one of them dies, so maybe Chaveiro Shalo Bahagrola. You could bring the other one without doing a lottery. Divrei Rabbi Shimon. That's the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And this is talking specifically about a situation where you already did the lottery, you designated one LaHashem and one is LaAzazel. Then if the one LaAzazel dies, so then you just bring a new one LaAzazel without doing a lottery. And again, that could be the case where you might think you could do it, but Mechusar Zman, so the pasuk needs to teach you no. And the Gemara continues with another answer. Ravina says, Ravina is going to give an answer according to all opinions. A situation where you can have a sar LaAzazel without doing a hagrola, without doing a lottery, kagon shehumam. Let's say you had the sar LaAzazel and it develops a mum, v'chillo al-acher. Then what you do is, you have to redeem it onto another animal. You don't do a lottery. You might think again that other animal can be Mechusar Zman. That's why we're teaching you it cannot be Mechusar Zman. Rashi over here says, Ravina Amar ki yitzrich krod Mechusar Zman. When do we need the pasuk of Mechusar Zman? Kagon shehumam hamishtaleach mishehigril olav. You had a situation where after the lottery, the seir mishtaleach develops a mum, v'chillo al-acher. So now you have to redeem it on another animal because the first one has a blemish. V'zeh in sarach lahagril shem mikoach harishon ba. You're not going to need a lottery because it's coming off the strength of the first animal. That's the case according to Ravina, where everybody agrees that you do not need a lottery. So the Gemara now says, Umanot tamer de pasel be muma. What is the source that mum pasels when it comes to the seir mishtaleach? We know you can't bring a carbon from an animal that has a blemish, but how do you know the seir mishtaleach cannot have a blemish? The Tanya, so the Gemara says that's learned from the following brisa, v'isha lo sitnu mehem. It says you're not allowed to bring a carbon from an animal with a blemish. So elu achalovim, this refers to the fats that you burn on the mizbeach. You're not allowed to burn those fats of the blemished animal on the mizbeach. Ainli alakula, and I only know maybe the entire thing you can't do. Miksason minayin, how do I know I can't burn even a part of it? As Rashi says, kezayis mehen, maybe I could take a kezayis of such an animal and burn it on the mizbeach. Talmud lomar mehem, it says from them, nothing of them can be brought on the mizbeach. And what does the word mizbeach mean? That means zuzrikas damim. That means you also can't take the blood from such a blemished animal and sprinkle the blood. And what does the word lahashem mean in the pasuk? Larabo seir mishtaleach. It comes to include even the seir mishtaleach is a problem if it has a blemish. And now the Gemara says, V'tztorich lemichtav balmum, v'tztorich lemichtav mechusar zman. You need a pasuk to tell us that a balmum is a problem by seir mishtaleach, and you need another pasuk to tell us that mechusar zman is a problem. Maybe you would think you don't need both once you know one is a problem, so we're basically saying it's like a regular carbon. No, you need both psukim. Because of Rachman and mechusar zman, if it only told us that mechusar zman is a problem by the seir mishtaleach mishum de lo mati zimne, because it's not yet reached the proper time, the proper age. Aval balmum de mati zimne, but a balmum which reached the proper age, I would say it's not a problem. Because of Rachman a balmum, and if the pasuk only said a balmum, mishum de mois, because it's disgusting to bring a blemished animal, so therefore, in the case of the seir mishtaleach also, that's considered disgusting. Aval mechusar zman, but when it comes to mechusar zman de lo mois, that's not disgusting. Eimalo, I would say that's not a problem. So tzricha, that's why you need psukim for both of them, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Dalid Amud Aleph.